So your podcast, what it did for me was that it spoke so normally about a home birth and a hospital birth. And I think home birthers, maybe myself included, can get very attached to the idea of a home birth being the best way to do something. And I don't think that's true, even after having it. The best way for a mom to give birth is the way that's going to give her the most peace in the moment.
Our reviewer of the week is Cakes3054, and she says, late to the game. I am 35 weeks pregnant and just discovered this podcast last week. OMG, I have been binge listening and have learned so much already. You ladies are amazing, and I'm really hoping to get the birth I have envisioned this time around with my second. Thank you so much for all the information and all the tools you are providing to achieve our birth-related goals. If you are here listening and you are also feeling like you are, quote, too late to the game because you are 35, 36 weeks, I promise you, you are not too late. There are so many things that you can do, even within that small amount of time, to get your mental state ready to go and even some prep for your body. So keep listening, keep following along, keep putting in the work. Every little bit of that is going to help and support you along the way. With me today, I have Martha. I am so excited that you are here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And you guys, it is another birth story podcast. So here we go.
Hi, I am Martha Henon. I am in Kentucky. I had 2 home births. I found your podcast before the second. I'm a yoga teacher. I love plants. I have a little small business. I was just singing kirtan before this started. So that's the kind of person I am. I guess that's a good description enough.
I love it. Yes. And thank you for being here today because I'm really excited for another good birth story. So with that in mind, will you start us at the beginning? Tell me a little bit about your pregnancy, how those things went, if there's anything that popped up along the way, change of providers, anything like that. You kind of shared briefly that you had a home birth with your first. So even if you want to touch on that experience and then dive into this pregnancy, that would be great.
Yes, I will. They were very different. So I will say I didn't know gender with either because that affects the ending to me. But the first one, let's see, the pregnancy was different. I had no morning sickness and it ended up being a girl, which, that's kind of opposite. But I had one provider. We don't have a lot of midwife options in this area. So there isn't a lot of choice there, which is unfortunate. Fine. They're very experienced, but I had a few midwife students in that first birth, which one of the students ended up being the midwife at my second birth. But with the first one, I did it at home. I was in an inflatable tub, which I did not want to repeat the second time because I did not have leverage enough to push on the sides. I birthed on my hands and knees. I had a cervical lip that the midwife had to put her finger in. And as I pushed during those pushing contractions, that was unpleasant if anybody else has had that happen. She was born. I saw she was a girl, started hysterically laughing because I thought she was a boy the whole time. My husband still remembers that being really an interesting emotion. And then it was the funniest thing that happened. And immediately after Cora was born, I saw she was a girl. I'm laughing. And then in my own head, and I didn't share this with anybody, but in my own head, I'm thinking, I just went through a lot. I'm really tired. I definitely could have confused a little penis with a little vagina. So I'm going to check again, right? And I held her up again. Confirmed little vagina. Okay. I wasn't, I didn't hallucinate there. So, but I was so happy about that. And my water broke both times, which I don't know if it's unfortunate or not, because I definitely knew I was in labor, but also I don't know the difference, but I hear it makes your contractions a little bit stronger. So the first one, I guess, was kind of uneventful. Or I don't know, it's all a big event, but nothing really, really crazy happened. Just that my water broke at the beginning. It was a really long go. I labored a lot in the water with the first one, in that inflatable tub, and then also in my bathtub. My contractions slowed down when the birth team arrived greatly. I think I had 20 something. My husband was so sweet. He was trying to write everything down. We had done a Lamaze class, so he was really trying to differentiate between active labor or, like what the minutes were or how long the contractions were. And so he wrote them all down. And I think I had maybe like 20 something contractions in an hour. Like it was like Pitocin, and when they get there though, everything slows down. And knowing my daughter, she is very shy. And so I understand that now. Like she was like, wait, why are all these people here? What's going on? So everything slowed down. But anyway, so the second one, okay, this one I just had in April. And it was a boy, which I didn't know until he came out. And
okay, don't go into that birth story just yet, because I want to walk through the pregnancy and all of that stuff. But I do want to ask you about your first birth and it being a home birth, because you don't always find that to be the case. So I'm just curious how it came to be. Did you start with an OB and switch to a home birth midwife? Did you have people in your life that were like, just do home birth? How did that happen for you?
I had no one in my life who was like, do a home birth. I think that's significant. I have always been kind of naturally minded. So the idea of doing things the most natural way, I wanted to birth the most physiologically natural way. And I understand that does not give some people peace. It gave me a lot of peace to do it that way. And from the beginning, so I should say, I actually had a miscarriage before my first birth. So I found the midwife at that very first pregnancy. I miscarried at 8 weeks. And then, and let me just say something about that. If anybody else has experienced that, I did not feel that baby died. I felt like it was my daughter. She just left and came back. Like she was in a little bit of a hurry. So, when we conceived, she was like, okay, I'm coming down. My job was really stressful at the time. It was kind of bad timing. I ended up miscarrying and she just kind of left. And I remember speaking to her and saying, why did you leave? Like, why did you leave? Like everything was fine. And I miscarried like tissue, like it was working, like what's going on, And then the next opportunity, my job had changed. I was working from home and she came back. So that's just a different perspective. I don't hear a lot. So maybe somebody will like that. But anyway, so that's how I found the midwife the first time. And then I did go to the doctor 13 weeks when I became pregnant that second time. He was very nice. It was a recommendation from the midwife, like, which OB do you all recommend in the area? So I go to him. He was very chill. Didn't make me get a pap smear in the visit, very, very nice guy. But he told me I had to stay in the hospital for 2 days. Even if everything went great, I would have to stay in the hospital for 2 days. And I didn't like that. And I didn't like the fluorescent lighting. That was kind of uncomfortable for me. And so my intention was always to have a home birth. And then after that hospital visit or the appointment, I was just kind of like, yeah, I definitely think I'm going to be more relaxed at home. And I was, and I will revisit how I didn't have anybody telling me to have a home birth because my mother, basically every woman in my family had a C-section. And the idea of birth was not a joyous experience, the stories that I hear, right? My mother had an emergency C-section. My brother, he was the first one, he was in distress. She had to do this. It was kind of scary for her, and she never talked about birth, pregnancy. She never talked about it in a good way. And so for me, I just decided no fear. That first pregnancy, I just remember thinking, no fear. There's no fear in this house about this. We're not having any fear surrounding the birth. And that was not easy, but, it required a lot of faith in myself and reaching deep, deep back in my ancestry. Obviously a woman in my past had a natural birth at some point. And so I believe in your genes passed down information, right? And so somewhere in my body, there's, some DNA that knows how to do this. And so I had to access that. But my husband was very supportive. He had no idea it was even an option. He didn't know you could even have a baby in your bathroom, And so yeah, nobody was discouraging, but I didn't have anybody to really talk to either, besides the midwife, who had done this. So it was just a lot of intention, with that first one.
I like that. Okay, so talk about this pregnancy then. So you have this wonderful experience with this home birth and having that first baby. And now what is this pregnancy like for you? Second pregnancy. And I love it because I love moms hearing like second time around, like what they can expect or just relating with other people's experiences, because it is so different once like the very first time you go through it and then kind of knowing where you're at the second time.
Yeah. So the second one, very, very different pregnancy. I was sick for 5 months.
Oh boy.
I had, and maybe this matters, but I had lost like a significant amount of weight in between them. I just got really, really small. I did this big, long fast. And I think that, I don't really know if that made a difference or not, but it was a big event in between the two. So I was sick for 5 months. I was driving a lot for my job, in the car 2 days a week, driving a lot. It was awful. I ended up quitting that job because I was just like, I'm too pregnant. I don't care about this, and I talked to my husband about the finances, and I was like, I would rather count pennies than have a paycheck right now. Like, this is awful, driving for this. But I did find your podcast driving back and forth.
Nice.
So I'm binging it, like listening, and the biggest difference though, and this doesn't make any sense, and this is why I think like inherited birth trauma is a thing, is, I had this home birth. It was a great experience. I was not traumatized, And the second pregnancy, I had so much anxiety that I did not know where it was coming from. And you'd think I had known, like I knew what to do, that I'd have more confidence. And it wasn't that I didn't have confidence. It was just kind of like, I was scared something was going to go different. It was maybe like I had such a good experience. I was afraid that wasn't going to happen again. And so your podcast, what it did for me was that it spoke so normally about a home birth and a hospital birth. And I think home birthers, maybe like myself included, can get very attached to the idea of a home birth being the best way to do something. And I don't think that's true even after doing it. I don't think that's true. I think the best way for a mom to give birth is the way that's going to give her the most peace in the moment. And maybe for some people that is in a hospital setting, So, but I was just so afraid of something going different. And I really forced myself to identify that core fear, like, where is that coming from? Where is this anxiety coming from? One thing I did actually was I switched providers in the middle, which is not common with a midwife. I had signed up with my first midwife, and it just didn't seem, I'm not gonna say anything bad about her because she's great. She's very knowledgeable, very like calming, but something just wasn't right. And I'll tell this story because it's kind of fun. We had a Valentine's Day reservation. Yeah. And so this baby was born in April. So I was like pretty far. This is in February. And it was a weird time, like 5 o'clock, like some weird, kind of early for dinner on Valentine's Day. And I run into Jennifer, who was the midwife student at my first birth. Okay. She's at the table right next to me and I'm popping out pregnant. Right. She's like, hey. I'm like, hey, oh my gosh. And we kind of start talking, and we left. And I told my husband, I was like, there's a reason why we saw her. And I was like, I'm going to switch over. So I go and meet with her. And I'm like, hey, would you even do this? And she's like, yeah, totally. So, and I had to be bold and call the first midwife and be like, hey, I'm switching. That wasn't the most pleasant conversation. And then there was like we lost some money. I mean, that's just part of it when you do the home birth. You're writing checks, and we did lose some money there, but I don't care. It was the best decision for me. to do. And so I switched midwives, and that gave me a lot more peace. So if anybody feels that way, be confident in your own self. But so I switched to Jennifer, and so that was part of the anxiety, right? And so then I'm like, what is this worst fear? Like, what is making me so nervous about birth? And it was like, I don't want to end up in the hospital. I don't want to end up in the hospital. Like, and I was like, well, why? Why don't I want to end up in the hospital? And then I think about my mom telling me these horror stories, not horror, sorry, but telling me these, her birth experiences, which were not pleasant. And it really came down to the idea of powerlessness. That's what I was so afraid of, was being powerless in this moment, where I find pregnant women being the most powerful form of human, right? And I was afraid that in this divine moment, my power would be taken from me. And so I'm listening to your podcast, and what was giving me so much peace was these birth stories of these women in this hospital setting still maintaining their power, right? So I faced that within myself, thinking, okay, if this baby gets up, crooked in there, I can't do this home birth, as long as it is my choice and my decision to do this C-section or do this epidural. Like, I'm choosing to. No one is making me feel inadequate. Like, you need to do this, or you're not gonna be able to birth this baby unless you do this. Like, no. As long as it is the power remains in my being, and I'm not externalizing it, then the experience is what I'm going to want it to be. So that was a big deal. I mean, I guess saying it, maybe it doesn't, because it's in hindsight and it doesn't seem like it was so hard, but that's what I think of when I think of this pregnancy, is really facing like my fears surrounding how I wanted my birth experience to go. And let's see, another fear was my water was going to break again. And it did. But I did everything I could. I read every medical study. I ate so much vitamin C and collagen. It didn't work. My water just breaks at the beginning. But that wasn't so bad. So that's the pregnancy, basically.
So was it pretty like straightforward then? You didn't have any like did you test positive for GBS? Did you have any issues with hypertension, gestational diabetes, anything like that?
I had low iron. And Jennifer, so Tracy was, well, I said her name. The first midwife wasn't that worried about it, but it was making me nervous. And Jennifer was very serious about it. And she checked my blood just like every other week. Like, if you don't get it up to this, you're going to risk out, And so I was very vigilant getting my iron up, and I did, and it was fine. And it was good, because jumping to the end, I bled more at the end with the second one. So it was really good that I got that iron up.
How did you, if you don't mind me asking, how did you get that iron up? Because this is a conversation that I think a lot of moms have, and specific to having home births and needing to be in certain levels to safely give birth at home. What did you do?
So specifically, I took Hemoplex, which is a supplement you can just get on Amazon, and it was great. It didn't give me any like sickness or anything weird. I also, and this is where it gets a little weird, I also took organ supplements. So
I don't think that's weird at all. This is what I recommend.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really into that. So I was eating a lot. In my area, we have farms, so it's easy for me to get local meat, and I can ask the farmer like, hey, I want the heart, I want the liver, so I was doing that, grinding it up. If anybody's grossed out by that, just grind it up and make tacos. You really don't know the difference. And then I was
with
also
that,
eating,
I'm just going to put a plug here, because I've actually started taking myself beef liver organ supplements, but like the supplements, I am not grinding it myself and eating it that way. So you can also take it freeze dried for those that are listening. And if that is not for you, I mean, it's great. If you can stomach it, that's the best way, right? Like fresh, natural food is going to be the best way to get it. But if you can't, beef liver organs are awesome. And I'll actually put a link in the show notes. There's a company that I've been using, and I have a 15% discount for that as well. You guys can click that there. But I think that's huge that you're talking about that, because this is something that a lot of women, it's like what's funny is like this was a thing back in the 50s, 60s, 20s, 30s, all like back then. It was totally normal.
To eat liver, to eat, the organs. And now it's like
we've gotten away from it. It's so weird. And right, exactly.
The desiccated though, like the organ supplements, that kind of could be better because a lot of those are raw and then
Right.
freeze dried. So you're kind of eating it in the raw form there. So that, I mean, arguably it could be better than cooking it, you know? And I won't say
I'm like,
brands,
whatever way you can get it in your body.
yeah, whatever way you can get it. But
Yes.
so I found a like beef liver. Yes, that's great. But I found a company that you can get like every body part. So I found one that was for women, and it was uterus and like ovaries.
Oh, interesting.
And fallopian tubes. Yeah. So I was taking that. I think all that kind of worked together to get my iron up. But my iron was great. She was like, I don't know how it got up. It got so fast, or got up so high so fast. You know,
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
like,
how
I'm
you
crazy
did it.
and I do crazy things. I take nutrition very seriously, which I could go on and on about nutrition, but those were big, big things in both my pregnancies. And yes, you need to eat good things. It's easier to find information on what you should eat, right? But there's a lot that you should avoid. Like, I think part of the reason why my pregnancies went so well is because I was avoiding like inflammatory things, you know. So yes, eat the organs, but also don't eat things that are bad for you, right? Like, yes, you're pregnant and you have cravings, but like try to get the healthier option. Anyway, I will not go on a tangent about nutrition. It's one of my passions. But anyway, so yeah, my iron was low. So I had, at the beginning, I convinced myself I had gestational diabetes. I did not. I was just having some weird sugar, like my digestion was slow, and I think it was affecting my blood sugar, but also anytime I had blood work, my sugar was really low. I like didn't eat sugar. That's the thing. Like the carbs I would eat would be like a banana. So I'm like, bananas aren't going to give me gestational diabetes. So I was worried about that, but that ended up being like a non-issue at the end. I was GBS positive with my first baby, and my second one, I was negative. And I can tell you how I did that. Maybe because I know it's kind of like changes, but I made my own like probiotic blend and was like inserting it like a liquid. I was inserting it into my, vagina. We're all, familiar with that here, I guess. And that's how I did. That's how I think I got my GBS, because I read about it and it's just a bacteria, right? So I'm like, okay, well, if I could introduce good bacteria into the area, then maybe I can cancel out the bad. That was what I did for that. And I ended up being negative. So there was nothing, I don't think there was anything else weird. Maybe ask me, it'll remind me.
No, like the other one would have been like, broken back of waters.
Yeah.
No, I can't think of, if there's nothing like popping off at you, then probably not. I am curious though about your prep work. So like you found the podcast, you're binge listening the podcast. Obviously you jumped into the birth course. I want to hear, maybe you can tell us what time, like how pregnant you were when you decided to do that. And then how you and your birth partner worked together on these things to prepare. And when you're talking about it, as much as you can, get into those like nitty gritty details of how you prepared. Like, I did this every day. I listened to this. I was thinking about this. I physically did that. So
the second birth was much more mental. I will say my first birth, I was very active, would not sit down. Like, I'm so pregnant, I'm out pulling weeds, It was very, very important to me. Just stay moving, stay moving. And my daughter came out that way. She's not a chill baby, right? So the second one, I was intentionally going to relax more, hoping to create a more relaxed baby. And it kind of worked. But so the second time, prep work, I read a lot of books. Birthing from Within is one that I did. I did a Enlightened Pregnancy, which was it's like Buddhist inspired, but you get like a nightly meditation where you're kind of connecting with the baby. There's a Buddhist belief where the spirit before they're born, they're going through like a journey, and you help them through that journey spiritually. So that might be a little weird for some people, but I did that meditation every night. And I did like a labyrinth meditation. So like I have like a clay labyrinth, and I would trace it with my finger, thinking about the journey into birth, right? So as you're nearing the end of your pregnancy, you're getting closer and closer to that birth space, which is it's a very distinct mental space that you find yourself in. And then of course, working your way out through the postpartum period and imagining that process. My husband, he would rub my belly every night with my belly cream. And I did a dry brush massage, dry brush massage every night. And he would do that for me. And then yoga. So I'm a yoga teacher, and I did teach yoga up to like 9 months through March I did. And it was with a mom's group, and I taught a handstand class, and I'm like upside down on the wall when I'm so pregnant, and they're like, you shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, oh, maybe not. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But lots of movement. And I don't like just talking about the movement. And even in yoga, people treat pregnant women like they're so fragile. If you twist this way, you're going to hurt yourself. And I just don't think that's the case. I think you need to really stretch out the front body to give the baby room to move. If it feels good, do it. Like, don't be afraid. Your body is on like extra alert as far as protecting you. So you shouldn't be worried about that. I listen to your podcast daily. The movements. So I did the movements every day, like the 3 essential movements, and those are like in yoga as well. In yoga, squatting, like holding onto the counter, trying to, not to tip over when you're in your squat. I practiced my birth positions in the bathtub. So I mentioned the first time I was in an inflatable tub, and I distinctly remember being on my hands and knees and just not wanting to be on my hands and knees, but I was so tired. I could not be in a squat because the inflatable sides were giving too much. Like, I didn't have anything to lean
Needed
on.
the support. Yeah.
Yes. And so the second one, we have a freestanding tub that was tall enough, for me to be on my hands. And I'm also small, to be on my hands and knees and my bottom covered. So I'd get in that tub and practice how I wanted to birth, right? And I'd be like, okay, my husband would be in there with me. And I'm like, okay, so if I get it here, I can press on this side and press my back against the other side, like hypothesizing how I'm going to birth this baby in this tub. So I think that was really helpful. And also, I would just pee freely anywhere that I could to relax my pelvic floor. So obviously you pee in the toilet, but in the shower, just pee. If you're taking a bath, pee. Your body's so trained to only relax your pelvic floor on the toilet, right? And when you're in labor, you just need to be able to relax it wherever you may be. And so I did that a lot. That was very intentional at the end, was just peeing not on the toilet as often as I could, not just like around the house, but so towards the end, all that got a little more rigid, as far as keeping your routine. But I did a lot of that every day. And I wasn't working. So I said I hated my job driving. And I know that's like that not everybody has that privilege, right? To not be working towards the end. And I was able to. So I had some time, and I just remember I remember doing laundry, doing all the baby laundry and listening to your podcast, and doing the best thing, was the like the movement for me, because I was in my head so much the second pregnancy, that making sure I was moving my body in the right ways. And since I had a heads up as far as I'd already had a home birth, I kind of knew what movements I wanted to be doing. And then his birth, so how he actually came out was much different and unexpected, if I can tell that part now.
Yes. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
That's a good segue. Let's go ahead and start with the birth. Take us from that first contraction all the way through.
All right. First contraction. So wake up in the middle of the night with a gush. So it was 2 a.m. and it's just no question what it is, right? So I get up, I do my little Q-tip anyway. So, the amniotic fluid Q-tip that turns green or whatever. Okay. So I did that anyway. I knew. I go get my husband. Hey, my water broke. He's like, what? I will say, my first one, my water broke at 38. My second one, I was 39 and a half, or 38 and a half, and then 39 and a half. So I was a little early both times. And they also tell you your first birth, your contraction time is cut in half with the second one, right? And that's what they told me. So the first one was 18 hours. So I'm like, this one's only gonna be 9. I'm gonna have this baby by morning, So I told my husband, we're getting ready, because with Cora, everything started so fast. It was 30 minutes after my water broke. It's just back to back to back. Well, this time, very, very slow entry. I don't think I really had contractions until maybe like 5 or 6 a.m. And then I remember in the morning, my mom had come, and I was like sweeping the floor and like having these contractions, and they just like weren't that bad. And they were very sporadic, very far apart. And maybe that's normal for some people, but that's not how my first birth went. So I was kind of like, eh. So I call everyone in the morning, midwife, doula, hey, water broke. And the midwife was like, I'd really love to have a daytime birth. And I was like, I got you. This baby is going to be born before the moon rises, And then my doula was like, well, how do you feel? Do you want me to come over? I'm like, sure, yeah, come over. It's nothing really crazy is happening, And so she did. She gets there at like 11, and I was just like laboring in bed, peeing in my diaper, peeing freely in my diaper. Okay. Somehow that's important to me to express on this podcast, is the peeing freely. So and this is something that I have never heard, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I have not heard this. This happened in both my births. It's like my transition is an emotional thing. So I have a handful of contractions that are timed like contractions. They last as long as like a physical contraction, right? But it's like a sob, like a sobbing feeling, like almost like a hyperventilation, like sobbing, crying, and then it goes away. So when that happened, my doula is like, okay, this is serious. We need to get the midwife here. And that was at like 11. And I was like, all right, I'm ready to go, So then I things started getting more painful at that point. And I didn't have back labor. I just had it in the front, I guess. But, it kind of feels like it's on your whole body. So it's a lot. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant. But I was in my bathtub for about 2 hours. And it was what felt really good to me. So I'm in this hard-sided tub, and what felt good to me was pressing on one side with my arms, and that would press my low back into the other side. So there was like pressure on both. And so I keep switching. I'm sorry. My first birth, my husband and the doula had to do hip contractions, or hip compressions with every contraction. And the second time, I think they maybe did 1 or 2. Like he was bored, she was bored. He's like, what do you want me to do? I'm like, nothing, it's fine. Like everything's good. I'm just in the tub. I did vocalize more how bad it hurt the second time. Like I was looking at my husband. I'm like, this is awful. This sucks. I don't want to do this right now, And I'm just like, he's looking at me like nothing's happening. And that was something my doula and the midwife both told me both times, is like, I guess the look on my face is very calm because I'm just worried about breathing and trying to relax every muscle in my body. And they don't, it doesn't look like what's happening inside of me is happening, I guess, because I look so peaceful, but I'm like, no, it's awful. Like everything hurts, So I am intuitively pushing, right? So I don't know if everyone listening here knows that, but when your body is ready to push, you don't have to try. It is just something that starts on its own. And that's how it was for me. Like you make your noises change, like you have to vocalize while you're pushing, I think, because it just helps, it's a very like guttural kind of primal noise. It's great. So that starts happening. I'm still in the tub, and I'm in kind of like a seated position pushing, and my midwife wanted to do a cervical check to see if I had a lip, right? I didn't do any cervical checks either time because I did not want to know if I was laboring for 4 hours and I was only a centimeter. I did not want to know because that was going to kill my mental game, right? Like I did no cervical checks until the very, very end. She wanted to see if I had a cervical lip or not. And so at this point I'm pushing it, but it didn't feel like it was going anywhere. Like even in this moment, I'm like, this baby's never coming out. I'm never having this baby. Like ship me up to the hospital because this baby's just never going to come out. And I remember telling my midwife, you think this baby's going to be born soon? Like, and she says, so you have something in the way, either it's a cervical lip or your bladder's full, something is in the way. Why don't you get out of the tub, go sit on the toilet for a few contractions and try not to push, So I'm like, okay, like in my head, I'm like, I do not want to be, this is the last thing I want to be doing is climbing over the edge of this tub and like waddling to this toilet, you know? So I'm sitting on the toilet. They're telling me not to push. And at this point it is instinctual. I'm not trying to, it's just happening, you know? And so I'm like, I can't not push. I can't not push. And so I guess I should say, like, from where I'm saying now until he comes out is about 4 minutes. So this is a very fast paced story, what I'm saying here. So I'm on the toilet. I have a few contractions. I stand up. I'm just listening to my body at this point. I stand up, and I'm not exaggerating when I say his head just fell out of me. Okay. So I'm standing in front of the toilet. His head just is hanging there from me, and his shoulders were stuck. So my husband's outside of the toilet room, and they're like, do you want to get back in the tub? And I'm like, no, we're way past the tub, you know, at this point. So I waddle out, I get in a lunge. The midwife does something to unhook his shoulder. I have like one more push, I think, maybe, and he slides out. So it definitely felt like much less work as far as getting him out that time. Cora was a little more challenging. But I think it was positional. In hindsight, it was definitely positional with her is why it was a little more difficult, because with him I was standing, you know, and he just fell right out. So like I said, I didn't know he was a boy. I wanted a boy so bad. I didn't check because I had a girl, and I wanted a boy because we don't want a lot of kids. And so I was like, I don't want to be pregnant again in my life. I want the second kid to be a boy, and then I want to be done. But I didn't know. And so my mental way to cope with that was like, I'm going to hope it's a boy the whole time I'm pregnant. And when I birth, if it's a girl, I have those endorphins, right? That will like make me be excited, and I'll have this little girl to love, and everything will be fine. But the whole time I was like, I hope it's a boy. I hope it's a boy. So I'm in this lunge position. The midwife is reaching through and kind of catches him behind me, right? And I can't believe I remember this, but in the moment, you know, I kind of like come up on my knees, and I'm like, don't hand me the baby. I want to reach for the baby. It was important to me for the baby, I guess, to experience me reaching for them. I don't know why exactly. I must have heard that somewhere. So I sit back. She flips the baby over. My husband sees that it's a boy, and he's like, oh, you know, oh man. And I see, and I just start screaming celebration like I had just won the Super Bowl, like expletives that should not be shared on this family-friendly podcast, right? Before I even picked him up, he's just laying there, right? And I'm just like screaming, yes, yes, yes. So I finally pick him up, and it was just the best feeling, like the best feeling, sense of relief. It was so great. I'm on the floor. So I think it's cool that I had a water birth and a land birth, because I was also talking about fear. I was also kind of afraid to do it on land because I thought it would hurt more, you know, and it didn't hurt more, but it was definitely way more messy, just blood and stuff everywhere. But so his shoulders were stuck. I don't think I technically hemorrhaged, like whatever cc's a hemorrhage is. I don't think I technically did that. But I did bleed a lot, not a lot, but more, enough to where even in like that, the next hour or so, I was very, very thankful that I got my iron up because if I hadn't, I probably would have fainted. It was, you know, it wasn't a little bit. And so then we wait, you know, placenta comes out just fine. I had a really short cord the first time and a really long cord the second time. So I think that's cool too. And then, yeah, I moved to the bed, and I did have to get 4 stitches, which I didn't have the first time at all. So yeah, he had a very excited entrance. Both of them, I think, had very excited welcome, you know, like welcomes into the world, but his was just a little more aggressive, I guess. Like her, I was kind of crying and happy and like, oh my gosh, this is so funny. And with him, you know, I'm like, yes, like pumping my fist in the air, so excited that he was here. So yeah, very, very different. But his was a good one for sure. A lot shorter and less intense, but an interesting birth, you know, actually through the canal was a little bit different.
Yeah. No, that's really neat. I actually like how you were contrasting back and forth so that women can hear, things are different and it's totally normal. Like and both births were beautiful and both were great and at home. And like, it didn't have to be this big drastic thing. It's just the reality of it is the labor can be different and the experience can be different. And like how you birth your baby, all of that, it just never is exactly the same, So that's just the reality of it. That's wonderful though.
Well, I think that I do think that how a baby's born is significant for their life. So as the mother and like as the pregnant woman, you can plan and plan and plan all you want. Like if I had really committed, I want to have this baby in water, like I really want to do that. And that's important. He wasn't supposed to be. He was supposed to be, on the floor. He was supposed to be on land or however you want to think of it. And so there is I do think giving the baby some say in how they're born, just in your mind, a little autonomy there is going to go a long way as far as taking the pressure off of you and like all these decisions you have to make, they have their own idea of how they want to come in. And that might be a little out there, but that is what I believe. So
no, it's the same reason that I tell women that reach out and they're like, my baby is breech. And it's like, okay, like here's all the things that we can do to try to get that baby to turn. And here's all the positive reasons to doing that. And if those things don't work, trust your baby because there's probably a reason that they're sticking it out that way. If you do all the things and that's not the story. So, and that's just one example. But no, I do believe that babies are born the way that they're born. I actually believe the people that end up in our birth space there's a reason for it, good and bad. I think a lot of that, there's a spiritual side to birth and it's a very sacred place. And there's a lot of things that we have control over and a lot of things that we don't see that are involved. And anyways, until you've been in that space, whether as a birthing woman or somebody supporting a birthing woman in that space, there's no way to describe everything that's going on. And even as I try now, it's not doing it justice. There's a different world there. So
right.
No, there's a big space for that.
It's just if anyone's listening, because I'm a very type A person, like I just described all these things I was doing during my pregnancy with my nutrition and stuff. And like, if you tell me this is going to help, then I'm going to do it, And so I can be like slightly rigid when it comes to controlling an outcome,
Oh, totally.
But at the same time, it takes a little of it should ease up. It should give you some peace about you can try to control it, but what is going to happen is what is supposed to happen. Like, even if it doesn't quote, like work how you want it to, everything happens like for a reason. I know that's like very cliche, but especially in the birth space, it's like everything goes the way that it needs to. Like me switching my midwife, like that didn't make any sense. It wasn't financially smart, but like I did it and thank God I did. And talking about women, the people in your birth space, I'm just going to say this in case anybody else has a relationship like this. The first time I said nobody supported me in my home birth, right? My mom didn't. And I told her she wasn't allowed in the birth space because she was going to bring too much fear with her. And I was like, no, like we can't have fear around this. And I told her she wasn't coming. And she was like, whatever. And she didn't really care because her birth was so different. Anybody who's had like a birth experience where it's like, oh, a room full of women and everybody's like, there's so much love and community. She didn't know that. I didn't know that either. So we weren't missing out on that or whatever. It didn't matter because everything, we didn't even tell anyone we had the baby until after Cora came, until after the first one was out. Everything was just it was in the middle of the night. We were tired and exhausted and it was so fast, but the second time too, I do think that's important is, who you have in your birth space. Don't have somebody in there just because you feel like you have to,
Yeah.
And you definitely don't want anybody who's gonna like distract you in those special moments. And you are very empowered. One more funny thing that happened during his birth, when I was on the toilet and they were telling me not to push and try to relax, right? And I'm like, I can't not push. One of the midwife, there was two midwife students. I always had like a room full during my birth. So it was great. And she comes in the toilet room and she's pretty close, just like squatting right in front of me. And she's trying to coach me through like a breathing, like breathe with me, And I just look at her, like eye contact. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work right now. And she's like, okay. And just got out, and afterwards, of course, I'm like, Amanda, I'm so sorry. I was so rude about the breathing exercise. And she's like, no, don't worry about it. So it is like a different kind of world. And if you let yourself, it's like a very authentic space where you don't really care if you offend somebody, So that was another kind of funny interaction.
Okay. Before we jump off, because I know I've had you for a little bit and I really appreciate your time, but I do like to end with like your best advice for birth partners and your best advice for moms. Like if you could sum it up into one sentence each, like what would that look like?
So for birth partners, it would be to both like have faith in the birthing woman, but also give her space. So you want to simultaneously like encourage her that she knows what she's doing. Her body knows how to do this, right? But also like giving her space to be like my husband. If he would have been like, oh, it's a bad decision to switch midwives, like because of the money or whatever, then everything would have gone very different. But he trusted me and he was like, okay, like whatever you need, so give him the room and the space to like be this birthing person that they're going to be. And then for pregnant women, I mean, don't be afraid. Decide not to be afraid, I guess, but don't try to control the fear. Like be with the fear, I guess. Just don't let it control you either. And nutrition's a big one. It's like eat your organs and eat your collagen, and don't skimp on the good stuff when you're pregnant. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you, Martha. Thank you for being here with me today and for sharing this story for everyone who is going to be blessed by listening to it.
Yes, I hope somebody likes it. Thank you so much.